At exactly 9:47 a.m. on Tuesday, September 12, 2023, inside the 62nd floor executive boardroom of Orion Global Tower in Manhattan, New York, the deal that was supposed to reshape the technology industry forever died in complete silence. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the Manhattan skyline shimmered under a cold autumn sun, yellow taxis crawling below like ants, unaware that billions of dollars were evaporating 62 floors above them. Inside that polished boardroom, a $4.8 billion strategic partnership between two of the most powerful corporations in North America sat on the edge of final approval. Pens were aligned neatly beside leather-bound contracts. Cameras were positioned for the press release. Smiles were rehearsed. And then the screen flickered. A confidential video began to play. At first, no one understood what they were looking at. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the city and the faint click of a laptop fan. But within seconds, color drained from faces around the table. A woman gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." On that 86-inch presentation screen was footage recorded inside a private penthouse suite at the Meridian Hotel 2 weeks earlier. The timestamp was visible, the lighting unmistakable, the faces undeniable. The CEO of Apex Dynamics, the smaller but fast-rising tech disruptor, was locked in an intimate embrace with the wife of the chairman of Titan Vanguard Holdings, the very man sitting at the head of the table that morning. No one moved. The chairman, Richard Halstead, did not blink. His jaw tightened so subtly that only someone studying him would notice. His wife's face on that screen, smiling, unaware she was being recorded, seemed to echo louder than the silence in the room. Across the table, Daniel Cross, CEO of Apex Dynamics, stared at the footage like a man watching his own funeral. In that moment, the partnership that would have merged Titan's global infrastructure with Apex's revolutionary AI technology collapsed without a single word spoken. The pen slipped from Daniel's fingers. And in less than 30 seconds, a multi-billion-dollar future disintegrated into betrayal, humiliation, and irreversible consequence. If you think corporate wars are fought only in spreadsheets and stock charts, stay with this story. Because what happened next would not just destroy a deal, it would destroy reputations, families, and legacies built over decades. But to understand how a single secret detonated a partnership of this magnitude, we need to go back to where it all began. 3 years earlier, Apex Dynamics was nothing more than an ambitious mid-level tech company operating out of a renovated warehouse in Brooklyn. Daniel Cross was not yet a headline name in financial magazines. He was simply a visionary engineer with a relentless drive and a product that most industry veterans dismissed as unrealistic. His team had developed a proprietary artificial intelligence platform capable of predicting supply chain disruptions with 92% accuracy, a breakthrough that could save multinational corporations billions annually. Investors were skeptical at first, but Daniel had something many CEOs lacked: obsession. He slept in his office during product development phases. He personally pitched to venture capitalists across Silicon Valley. He sacrificed family dinners, friendships, and most of his personal life to ensure Apex would not die quietly like so many startups before it. Eventually, it worked. Apex secured its first major contract with a European logistics giant. Revenue surged. Media outlets began calling Daniel the architect of predictive enterprise intelligence. By year 2, Apex was valued at $780 million. But Daniel knew something crucial. To survive long-term, Apex needed infrastructure, global reach, political connections, manufacturing pipelines. And there was only one company that could provide all of that in one stroke: Titan Vanguard Holdings. Titan was a titan in every sense. 50 years in operation. Operations in 27 countries. Deep government relationships. And at its helm, Richard Halstead, a man whose name carried weight in every major financial district on Earth. Richard was disciplined, calculating, and famously private. His marriage to Evelyn Halstead was often described in media as elegant and unshakable. They were the image of power and stability. When Daniel first approached Titan with a proposal, many believed it was audacious. Some even called it arrogant. But Richard was intrigued. The first meeting took place in Titan's Manhattan headquarters, not the 62nd floor boardroom, but a smaller executive conference room overlooking the Hudson River. Daniel walked in carrying nothing but a leather portfolio and a confidence that bordered on dangerous. For 3 hours, he presented Apex's technology, projections, global integration plans, and market expansion models. He did not oversell. He did not exaggerate. He simply laid out a future where Titan would dominate the next technological era. Richard listened carefully. By the end of that meeting, something shifted. What began as a cautious evaluation evolved into months of negotiations. Teams worked around the clock. Lawyers drafted frameworks. Financial analysts modeled integration outcomes. Media rumors started swirling about a potential industry-defining alliance. The deal structure was simple in theory but monumental in execution. Titan would acquire a 40% stake in Apex for $2.1 billion, integrate its AI systems across Titan's global network, and co-develop new predictive infrastructure platforms. If completed, both companies would surge to unprecedented valuation levels. For Daniel, it meant validation. For Richard, it meant future-proofing Titan's empire. And somewhere in the middle of those negotiations, something else began. Something far more fragile than contracts. It started innocently enough at a private gala hosted by Titan to celebrate innovation leaders. Daniel attended as an invited guest. Evelyn Halstead was present as always, graceful, articulate, admired. They were introduced formally. A handshake. A polite exchange about industry transformation. Nothing scandalous. But over the course of that evening, conversation lingered. Evelyn was more than a chairman's wife. She had a background in behavioral economics and had once consulted on market psychology for financial institutions. She asked Daniel questions others never thought to ask. Not about profit margins, but about ambition, about loneliness, about the cost of relentless pursuit. Daniel, who rarely allowed himself vulnerability, found himself answering honestly. That was the first crack. Weeks passed. Meetings multiplied. Negotiations intensified. And occasionally, in between official corporate discussions, Daniel and Evelyn exchanged messages. First professional, then personal. It was subtle, almost invisible. Late-night conversations about pressure, about expectations, about living under the microscope of success. No one noticed, or perhaps no one was looking, until the night at the Meridian Hotel. If you've made it this far, pause for a second and tell me in the comments. Do you believe secrets always find a way to surface, no matter how carefully they are buried? And if stories like this intrigue you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what unfolds next. Because what happened at the Meridian was not a simple mistake. It was the beginning of a collapse that would ripple far beyond one boardroom. And the most chilling part? Someone had been watching long before that video ever played on the 62nd floor. The night of August 28, 2023, at 11:36 p.m., inside the penthouse suite of the Meridian Hotel overlooking Central Park, the city lights glittered like distant stars against the glass walls, and Manhattan felt untouchable from that height. The suite was quiet except for the faint sound of jazz playing from a Bluetooth speaker and the low murmur of two voices that should never have been in the same room alone. Daniel Cross stood near the window, jacket off, tie loosened, staring down at the moving traffic below as if the city could absorb his guilt for him. Evelyn Halstead sat on the edge of the cream-colored velvet sofa, her heels abandoned near the marble coffee table, her posture tense despite the softness of the surroundings. Everything about the room was luxurious. Imported Italian furniture, gold-trimmed lighting fixtures, chilled champagne sweating in an ice bucket, yet the air felt heavy, like something fragile was about to crack. This was not their first private meeting outside official settings, but it was the first time the line had completely disappeared. The negotiations between Apex and Titan were in their final phase. Due diligence reports had cleared. Regulatory advisors were preparing final filings. The press release draft had already been written, pending signatures. The world believed the partnership was inevitable. But human weakness does not care about timing. Daniel told himself this was just a conversation, just two exhausted people sharing burdens. Evelyn told herself she was simply seeking understanding, something she no longer felt in her carefully managed marriage. Richard, for all his brilliance, had grown distant over the years, consumed by expansion, acquisitions, legacy. Their marriage looked perfect in photographs, but inside it had become procedural, polite, structured. Daniel represented something different. Passion, urgency, and that attraction, once acknowledged, moved faster than either of them anticipated. What they did not know, what they never suspected, was that Titan Vanguard's internal security team had quietly initiated surveillance weeks earlier. Richard Halstead did not build a global empire by trusting appearances. 3 weeks before that night at the Meridian, an anonymous email had reached Richard's private assistant. The message was brief, unsigned, and direct. You should look into the proximity between your wife and the CEO of Apex Dynamics. It may affect more than your marriage. Richard did not react emotionally. He reacted strategically. He instructed Titan's head of corporate security to conduct discreet monitoring, citing potential conflict of interest concerns related to the pending merger. No accusations. No confrontation. Just observation. Phone metadata was flagged. Calendar overlaps were analyzed. Hotel reservations connected to corporate expense reports were reviewed. Patterns emerged. And on the night of August 28th, security footage was captured. When the video later played in that 60-second floor boardroom on September 12th, it was not an impulsive act of humiliation. It was a calculated unveiling. But inside the penthouse, Daniel and Evelyn were unaware of the storm forming beyond those walls. Their conversation that night drifted from business to confession. Evelyn spoke about the loneliness of being married to power, about dinners attended but not experienced, about public appearances that felt staged, about becoming a symbol rather than a person. Daniel admitted that success had not erased his insecurity, that every milestone felt like it could vanish if he made one wrong move. Ironically, that wrong move was unfolding in real time. When their hands first touched, it felt electric, forbidden, intoxicating. It also felt like the kind of mistake that intelligent people convince themselves they can manage. They could not. And if you are watching this right now, ask yourself something honestly. How often do powerful people believe they are too smart to get caught? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because what happens next will challenge that belief completely. And if you value stories that expose the human cracks behind corporate empires, make sure you are subscribed, because this is where ambition and emotion collide. 2 weeks later, negotiations intensified. Lawyers were finalizing clause language regarding intellectual property integration. Analysts projected a combined valuation exceeding $12 billion within 18 months of merger completion. Financial media outlets were already speculating about a new era in predictive enterprise systems. Behind closed doors, however, Richard Halstead had already made a decision. He would not confront Daniel privately. He would not confront Evelyn quietly. He would wait. September 12th arrived crisp and bright. The boardroom was prepared for celebration. Executive assistants arranged branded folders at each seat. Catering staff positioned silver trays with coffee and pastries near the back wall. A communications team waited in a separate room, ready to publish the announcement across global networks the moment signatures hit paper. Daniel arrived confident. Tired, yes, but confident. He believed the merger was secure. He believed his secret was contained. Evelyn was not present. She had been told the meeting was purely corporate and unnecessary for her attendance. At 9:41 a.m., everyone took their seats. Richard entered last. He did not greet Daniel the way he normally did. No handshake. No subtle nod of professional respect. He simply sat down, folded his hands, and instructed the IT director to begin the presentation. Daniel assumed it was a summary of merger milestones. Instead, the screen flickered. When the video began, Daniel's body reacted before his mind could process what he was seeing. His stomach dropped. His throat tightened. He looked toward Richard, but Richard was not watching the screen. He was watching Daniel. Board members shifted uncomfortably. One of Titan's senior legal advisors reached for his glasses, removing them slowly as if clarity might soften the blow. No one spoke during the entire 47-second clip. When it ended, Richard finally leaned back in his chair and said calmly, "This partnership is terminated effective immediately." The silence that followed was heavier than the footage itself. Daniel attempted to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. He tried to frame it as personal, separate from corporate integrity. He insisted the technology remained sound, the numbers unchanged, the projections intact. Richard's response was surgical. "Trust," he said evenly, "is not compartmentalized." With that sentence, years of work evaporated. Titan's legal team immediately activated exit clauses citing ethical breach and executive misconduct risk. The acquisition was voided. Press teams were instructed to delay announcements. By 11:15 a.m., internal memos had been distributed. By 2 p.m., rumors had begun leaking to financial journalists. By market close, Apex Dynamics' valuation had dropped 38%. Daniel left the building not through the main lobby, but through a service elevator recommended by Titan Security. Outside, cameras were already gathering. If you can feel the weight of that moment, imagine building something for years only to watch it collapse in a single morning. Tell me in the comments, was Richard justified in exposing the affair publicly, or should he have handled it privately? And if you are drawn to stories where power, pride, and emotion intertwine, stay with this channel. Because what Daniel did not yet realize was that the collapse of the deal was only the beginning. Investors would soon demand answers. Board members would begin distancing themselves. And the secret that destroyed a partnership was about to ignite consequences far more devastating than a terminated contract. By 6:12 p.m. on September 12, 2023, inside Apex Dynamics headquarters in Brooklyn, the mood had shifted from confusion to controlled panic. The same open-concept office that once buzzed with innovation now felt suffocating under the weight of uncertainty. Television screens mounted along the exposed brick walls replayed financial news coverage of the morning's implosion, headlines flashing in aggressive red banners. Titan Vanguard terminates $4.8 billion merger amid ethical controversy. Executive scandal rocks Apex Dynamics. Trust breakdown halts industry-shaping deal. Daniel Cross stood in his glass-walled corner office, blinds partially drawn, phone vibrating relentlessly on his desk. Outside, employees whispered in clusters, pretending to work while refreshing stock trackers and media feeds. Some looked angry. Others looked afraid. Many simply looked stunned. In less than 8 hours, Apex had lost not only its largest opportunity, but its perceived stability. Investors who once fought for early access were suddenly requesting emergency calls. Venture capital partners who had praised Daniel's vision were now questioning governance practices. Board members demanded an immediate crisis meeting. But the financial damage was only the surface wound. The deeper fracture was credibility. And in the world of billion-dollar negotiations, credibility is oxygen. At 7 p.m., Apex's board convened in the same conference room where months earlier they had toasted the Titan partnership with champagne. Tonight, no one smiled. No one celebrated. The long walnut table felt colder than usual, the overhead lighting harsher. One board member, a veteran investor named Margaret Lynn, broke the silence first. Her voice was calm but edged with disappointment as she asked the question no one wanted to say aloud. "Daniel, did you believe this would remain hidden?" There was no shouting, no dramatic accusations, just the slow unraveling of trust in real time. Daniel attempted to separate personal failure from corporate strategy. He argued that Apex's technology remained groundbreaking, that Titan's reaction was excessive, that the company could still pivot and secure alternative partnerships. But every sentence felt defensive, incomplete. Because the truth was undeniable. He had jeopardized not just a merger, but the livelihoods of 312 employees who depended on Apex's trajectory. If you have ever led something bigger than yourself, you know the crushing weight of realizing your personal choices can ripple into hundreds of lives. Pause for a moment and reflect. Should leaders be held to a higher moral standard when billions and thousands of jobs are at stake? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if stories that expose the human consequences behind corporate power matter to you, make sure you are subscribed, because this story is far from finished. While Apex struggled to contain the fallout, Richard Halstead was navigating a different battlefield. At 8:45 p.m. that same evening, inside the Halstead family penthouse overlooking the East River, silence replaced the polished composure he had maintained all day. The confrontation he had delayed for weeks could no longer be postponed. Evelyn stood near the kitchen island, her phone in her hand, notifications lighting up the screen like accusations. She had already seen the headlines. She already knew. Richard did not shout when he spoke. His voice was steady, measured, devastatingly calm. Was any of it real? He asked. The question was not about business. It was about betrayal. Evelyn attempted to explain the emotional isolation she had felt for years, the loneliness hidden beneath public appearances. She insisted that what happened with Daniel was not calculated sabotage. It was a mistake born from vulnerability. Richard listened. But there is a particular kind of injury that does not respond to explanation. It responds only to consequence. By midnight, attorneys had been contacted. Not just corporate attorneys. Divorce attorneys. Meanwhile, the press machine accelerated. By the following morning, investigative journalists uncovered the surveillance origin, framing Richard not only as a betrayed husband but as a chairman who acted decisively to protect shareholder interests. Financial commentators debated whether his public exposure of the affair was strategic brilliance or ruthless retaliation. Apex's stock plummeted another 21% at market open. Suppliers began re-evaluating contracts. A pending European expansion was placed on indefinite hold. And inside Daniel's apartment, for the first time in years, the man who once thrived under pressure sat alone without a plan. He replayed the boardroom moment repeatedly in his mind. The flicker of the screen, the collective gasp, the way Richard's eyes never left him. He realized something chilling. Richard had not acted in anger. He had acted in control. And that difference made the consequences far more severe. Because controlled retaliation is more thorough than emotional reaction. As days passed, whispers turned into formal inquiries. The Securities Oversight Committee announced a preliminary review into whether the undisclosed relationship constituted a material risk factor that should have been disclosed during merger negotiations. Legal experts debated fiduciary responsibility and executive disclosure obligations. Suddenly, Daniel was not just facing reputational damage. He was facing potential regulatory scrutiny. The irony was brutal. The technology he built to predict disruptions had not predicted his own. Inside Apex, layoffs were discussed quietly. Cash reserves, once sufficient for aggressive scaling, were now projected to last less than 14 months without a major investor infusion. And investors were hesitant to attach themselves to scandal. One junior engineer sent Daniel an email late one night that read simply, "We believed in you. Please don't let this be the end." That sentence cut deeper than any headline. If you are still watching, consider this. How fragile is success when it depends not just on innovation, but on integrity? Share your thoughts below, because leadership is being tested in this story in ways numbers alone cannot measure. And if you want to see how far the fallout truly goes, stay with us. Because while Apex was collapsing publicly, something unexpected was happening behind the scenes. A private equity firm based in Singapore began quietly purchasing discounted Apex shares. A former Titan executive reached out anonymously to Daniel. And Richard Halstead, despite everything, had not yet delivered his final move. The secret destroyed the partnership. But the aftermath was about to reshape the battlefield entirely. At 7:18 a.m. on October 3, 2023, inside a private conference suite at the Langham Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, the future of Apex Dynamics hung by a thread thinner than anyone outside that room could imagine. The early morning sky was still pale gray, city traffic building below, unaware that another decision was about to determine whether a company would survive or disappear quietly into financial history. Daniel Cross sat at the far end of a polished mahogany table, not in the tailored confidence he once wore like armor, but in visible exhaustion. His beard was slightly unkempt. His posture carried the weight of sleepless nights and collapsing projections. Across from him sat representatives from the Singapore-based private equity firm that had been quietly acquiring Apex shares over the past 2 weeks. They were calm, calculating, patient. The lead partner, Adrian Koo, did not waste words. He slid a revised term sheet across the table and said, "We believe Apex still has value. But value must be stabilized. Leadership must be stabilized." Daniel understood the implication immediately. Survival would come at a cost. Outside that suite, media narratives had evolved from scandal to speculation. Commentators debated whether Apex could recover without Titan. Analysts dissected Daniel's character more than his technology. Social media turned complex corporate governance into viral outrage. Inside the room, however, numbers replaced emotion. The offer was straightforward but brutal. The private equity firm would inject $650 million in emergency capital, restructure debt exposure, secure short-term operational stability, and leverage their Asian logistics network to replace part of Titan's lost infrastructure advantage. But in exchange, Daniel would step down as CEO. He could remain as Chief Innovation Officer. He could retain equity. He could salvage the company he built. But he would no longer lead it. There are moments in a person's life when ego and responsibility collide head-on. For Daniel, this was that moment. He thought of the engineers who stayed late believing in the mission. He thought of the junior analyst who wrote, "Please don't let this be the end." He thought of the humiliation in that boardroom when the video played, of the silent judgment in every investor's eyes. And he realized something painful but clear. The company had become bigger than his pride. If you have ever had to choose between holding your position and protecting your purpose, you know how devastating that decision can be. Tell me honestly in the comments, would you step aside to save what you built, or would you fight to keep control? And if this story is making you rethink how fragile power really is, make sure you are subscribed, because the final consequences of this secret are still unfolding. By 10:02 a.m., Daniel signed. He would step down. The announcement was carefully worded and released 2 days later. Apex Dynamics announces strategic leadership restructuring and international capital partnership to ensure long-term stability. The language was sterile, corporate, sanitized. But behind that polished statement was a reality far more human. Richard Halstead read the announcement from his office overlooking the Hudson River. Titan had already shifted its strategic roadmap, pursuing alternative technology integrations through internal development and smaller acquisitions. Publicly, Titan remained strong. Their stock rebounded within weeks. Shareholders praised Richard's decisiveness. Privately, however, the cost had not been so neatly resolved. His divorce proceedings were ongoing. Evelyn had retreated from public life entirely. The elegant image of unity that once defined the Halstead brand had fractured permanently. Trust, once broken at that scale, does not quietly regenerate. Richard had protected his empire, but he had lost his marriage, and perhaps something softer inside himself. Daniel, now transitioning into a reduced executive role, spent more time in the lab with engineers than in boardrooms. He avoided interviews. He avoided headlines. For the first time in years, he was forced to confront the truth that brilliance does not excuse recklessness. Months later, Apex stabilized. The Singapore partnership opened new markets in Southeast Asia. Growth returned slowly, cautiously. The company survived, but it never became what the Titan merger would have made it. Not the unstoppable global powerhouse analysts once predicted. Not the $12 billion juggernaut poised to dominate an entire sector. It became something else. A resilient company rebuilt from humiliation, operating with sharper governance and stricter internal boundaries. And that is the quiet part of this story that headlines rarely capture. A secret destroyed a partnership worth billions. It erased years of negotiations in under a minute. It triggered regulatory scrutiny, market collapse, divorce, leadership resignation, and permanent reputational damage. Yet it also forced accountability, forced humility, forced transformation. At 9:47 a.m. on September 12th, when that screen flickered and the room fell silent, it felt like an ending. In reality, it was an exposure. Exposure of human weakness behind corporate power. Exposure of how quickly ambition can blur judgment. Exposure of how trust, once fractured, carries consequences far beyond contracts. If this story stirred something in you, Anger, empathy, frustration, reflection. Share your thoughts below. Do you believe Richard was justified in how he handled the exposure? Do you believe Daniel deserved a second chance? These conversations matter because business is not just numbers and signatures, it is people and choices. And if you want more stories that dive deep into the emotional undercurrents behind billion-dollar decisions, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Because sometimes the most devastating collapse does not come from market forces or competition. It comes from one secret and one moment that changes everything.